to the Startup Scale Up Show, a podcast that inspires entrepreneurs to create meaningful businesses and pursue their passions. My name is Demi Samande and I am a furniture manufacturer, best known for documenting my move to Lagos, Nigeria for hopes of business opportunities. And I'm sitting down with entrepreneurs from across the continent to talk about their process, the lessons they have learned, and how to make real impact. Welcome to Susu. Today's guest is Kudzayi, the CEO and co-founder of Amayi Foods Limited, a Nigerian-based company. Amayi Foods is passionate about making high-quality African food more accessible. She has over 20 years' experience in banking and private equity in Africa and holds a BA from Clark University, USA, and an MBA from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, USA. Kudzayi, thank you so much for agreeing to sit down with me today and have this conversation. Now, I just want to start by just saying that when I read up about your story and about the company profile, I must say I was a little bit envious.
Envious?
Yes. As a fellow manufacturer, I was incredibly envious because you and your partner have managed to find that product that can be available in every home, every food-based business, across not only Nigeria, across other African countries, and you're basically in the US, aren't you? You're distributing to the US as well.
Yeah.
So you've already crossed our Pan-African plan already. When did you guys sort of set up? How did the story begin? But more importantly, maybe just tell us how you got to the point where you birthed Amayi. To start with, where were you coming from, and how did the eureka moment come about?
Well, I had been, as you noted in my profile, I had been in banking and private equity for a few years, but I had always felt like a spectator. You know, just sort of helping or facilitating other people's dreams and what other people want to do. There's some people who are in banking and they love it. They love the deal, but I was not one of those people. So I had always wanted to set something up, just to build something. And, you know, the thing is, I just never knew what that was. While I was at ECP, I worked with Nana Apiakurang, one of my co-founders, and she introduced me to shito,
which is the Ghanaian delicacy, right?
Exactly, the Ghanaian pepper sauce. And I was obsessed with it from
really?
day one. Yeah,
it is hot.
It's hot, but you know you can make it to your specifications.
You can make it quite mild.
Yeah, so she taught me how to make it, but she makes the best shito, if I do say so myself. It's her mother's recipe, basically. You know, we kind of jokingly said, oh, one day we should set up a business, you know.
How long ago was this?
Oh, gosh, this was like in 2004 or 5.
Oh, wow.
It was a while back. So I then moved, this was in Washington, D.C. I moved to South Africa, then to Nigeria. Then she moved to Nigeria with ECP, and once again we started talking about shito and setting up a company and selling it, etc. And then in the process we roped in my husband's cousin Onome, and so she also became part of the business.
Okay.
And so we started sort of bandying around ideas, and this was 2014 or 2013, and then
from 2004
10 years,
to 2014.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really, for me, what probably prompted it was my saying, "Look, I've got to move. I've got to do this thing, this entrepreneurial thing, because, you know, I will regret it if I don't get it out of my system. So whether or not I do fail or succeed is another issue, but I really need to try it." And so I think that is kind of what prompted, you know, me to now sort of sit with her and say, hey, look, we've been talking about this. Why don't we try it?
See, it wasn't a particular event that happened.
So that's a good point. So in 2011, my father died and my brother died a few months later.
Wow.
So that was, you know, when you're kind of like faced with this, you know, the idea of mortality. It was a weird year because my niece was born at the beginning of the year. My father died, my brother died, and then my daughter was born.
It was a
at
turning
the end
point.
of the year. It was a really weird year. But I think that kind of left me thinking, look, I mean, if I die tomorrow, I mean, what
What would I
was the
do with
point?
all these ideas?
You know,
Yes.
what was the point if I hadn't tried this, And so it took a couple of years for me to be ready. But, by the end of 2013, I was done. I was kind of like, I've got to do this. So in the intervening 2 years, we had already spoken about the idea. We had started kind of testing out formulations and
In your own kitchen?
in our own kitchen.
Oh my God, I love that story.
And we did like a taste test,
No
where we
way.
had people coming in.
How
and-
do you taste test chili peppers?
So this isn't it's the sauce, right? It was the
Okay.
actual sauce. So we had taste tested with people coming in, but you can never actually get a very objective view
Okay.
from your mates. I mean, they're your mates.
They're always going
right?
to tell you it's fantastic.
So
aren't
we ended up getting a company to do it for us, a market
Oh.
research company.
they? Was this in
which-
the US?
No, here.
Here in Nigeria?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they got people in and, 100 people had them taste the product and they gave us the feedback.
Interesting.
And the feedback was actually very, very relevant.
Mm.
And, we, to this day, we still are seeing that feedback, which is really very interesting. But
So
yeah.
how long did it take for you from the moment you entered that kitchen and said, let's start testing this product, to when you had it professionally tested to receive that that sort of market
Feedback.
research and feedback? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, professionally, we still made it in our kitchen and then delivered it to the professional company. So it wasn't like,
Yeah.
well, because it has to be, it's a blind taste test anyway, right? So there's no
Okay.
branding or anything involved. So that's kind of how we did it. It took about, I don't know, I would say probably a few months because we already had the formulation. Now, the formulation has changed since that time.
I can imagine based
Also,
on the feedback. you would have
based
been
on the
gotten,
additional
yes.
feedback that we've gotten. And to your point about the spiciness, the first immediate feedback that we got, and because Shito is new to the Nigerian market, it's obviously Ghanaians know it well. But,
Yes.
and that has its pros and cons, because you can kind of define the product here.
Yes.
And also you'll see Nigerians tend to do more with Shito than probably Ghanaians would.
Really?
Yeah, so they use it for cooking a lot of the
Oh,
time.
okay.
They use it on things like bread. They just,
No
it's
way.
Nigerians
I
are
don't
very
eat peppers, so
resourceful.
I'm just thinking, why would it?
So the
I can
initial
imagine the
feedback,
formulation must be really.
well, it
potent.
wasn't as spicy when
Oh,
we
it
first
wasn't?
started.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it was the feedback from the market. People were
That
like,
it wasn't hot
this
enough?
isn't hot enough. And
Wow.
so we had to up the pepper levels
Mm.
to the point where I've actually had a couple of Ghanaians come to me and say, it's too spicy. Like, why did you do that?
So
Why
Nigerians
didn't
tend to eat more
you-"
spice than Ghanaians?
That is what I surmised.
You found yourself in Nigeria. How did you find that transition from? I think you've travelled the length and breadth of many countries from the US to other neighbouring African countries, and then now transitioning to Nigeria. How's that process been for you?
So it was very tough, actually. I think the first few years were very, very tough. It didn't help that I was traveling a lot for work, so I never felt very settled. And I think that it was actually when I had my first kid that I finally started
Being a mum does settle you a little bit,
yeah.
doesn't it?
So, there was not as much moving around and, definitely it just felt like, I was putting roots down. Yeah.
So I wanted to just kind of touch a little bit on Poi Poi.
Yeah.
So Poi Poi, I read, was one of those products that you launched at the last quarter of last year.
No.
Which product was that?
That's Tomapep.
Toma Pep is okay. So
Yes.
that's a product you launched in the last quarter,
Yeah.
the last 9 weeks of
Last
2000,
10 yeah,
the last
yeah.
10 weeks of 2019, and somehow it has been the biggest performer for you guys.
Yeah.
So just going back to the launch date of Amayi, that was in 2019 as well.
No, we have been around since 2015. We
Okay.
started, like late 2015, early 2016, we launched.
Okay.
And so these products, they're available in ShopRite. You can find them in
I-
Spar.
I've
and-
seen it because
Yeah,
I tend to
yeah.
go to the market sometimes just to buy my own sort of ingredients and stuff for
Yeah.
cooking.
Yeah.
So, but then reading up, we heard that. So for me, it was Toma Pepe was launched. So you launched in 2015.
Yeah.
Toma Pepper was launched in 2019, the last
Yes,
quarter.
yes.
And somehow it is super performed to the
Yeah.
point where it's now the biggest performer in your entire product range.
Yeah.
Well, this is why I said I'm envious of you, because that is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, but it took us a while to get there.
But how long is the process to basically develop Toma Pepper? How was that process for you?
So this was actually developed at the same time as Rodopep, because you see the names are very similar and the branding is very similar. But at the time that we developed it, it was a fully cooked product, similar to Rodopep.
Okay.
So Rodo is just peppers and onion and ginger and garlic. Toma Pepper is tomato, so
Okay.
it's more of a stew. So the idea was that it would be your ready to eat kind of stew. You just warm it up, or if you want to add chicken, or you can use it, cook it a little bit, and you're done. But what we subsequently did was talk to our distributors, and they all kind of told us unequivocally, if you want to be in the mass market, which we've always wanted to be, there is no room for a ready-to-cook.
So there was a product already?
Rather. A ready-to-eat product.
Okay.
They were like, if you want this to fly in the open market, like Lagos Island or anywhere else.
Which I imagine was a big segment of your clientele.
That was it was a big segment of our target clientele. We needed to be there. And I don't actually believe that you can do consumer goods in this country without being in that space.
Yes.
I think that you have to have a sort of portfolio approach to it, but you do need to be in this space, because people's buying power is not enough.
But even
that you've got enough volumes at the higher end.
Yes.
So you've got to figure out the lower end,
of course,
and then you can have niche products at the higher end. So basically we worked with our distributors and reformulated the whole thing. We had to change it and strip it down. And strip it down, take out all the stuff that we had put in it, which frankly people will find a cheaper way to add, right? They don't need you to add the oil or the spices or whatever. They'll figure that out themselves.
They're accustomed to their own way of cooking.
So we were over-speccing, basically.
Okay.
And the distributors were like, you're over-speccing. Strip it down and get it, because the other thing that you need to be mindful of is that the price point, it has to be a 50 naira retail price point. 70 grams, 50 naira. Non-negotiable.
Wow.
It was like
super specific.
Very specific.
How was it taking that information and processing it to redefine the product?
Well, look, we had to make a decision, right? I mean, we had to, as a company, what is our priority? Is it to make products that we like and our mates will buy, or is it to make products that we can sell, that people want, lots,
that you buy, yes.
And so we had to do it. We had to change the formulation. It was not uncontroversial, because we did have to add, some things to the formula that we wouldn't have added otherwise.
Yes.
But it was also because we had to get it to that price point.
Yes.
We also realized in the process that, we had been developing products along the lines of attributes that we value, but not necessarily
missing the mark with your clients.
Exactly, because we had to be looking at what they valued, and affordability was a huge one. And so that was part of the process. That was part of our process of kind of coming to terms with this. And, we had product demos with the distributors and, sent it around to people. So when we launched in at the end of 2019, it was kind of with that minimum viable product. We still got feedback from markets.
Yes.
Because, we're entering a space where they're big players, right? We're not the first to do this. That also has its pros and cons. But for us as a small player, the best part of it is that we don't have to explain the product, because it's a category that exists, right? So people will just be like, oh, okay, it's another one of that.
Yes.
Our branding is very attractive. And so people automatically are like, oh, what's this, right?
Yes.
So they would pick it up and they would try it.
Yes.
But what we needed to make sure is what was inside stood for something. Because, at some point I thought maybe we were getting a bit carried away with we were being benchmarked against these big companies, and we were trying to make sure that the attributes of our product kind of matched, but we were kind of forgetting that we still have to, well, I mean, we're never going to compete with them, right?
Yes.
So we have to carve out our own space
Within
that existing. And so we found that finally. And I think the minute that we did find it was when, the market immediately responded.
Yes.
And it was, people were immediately like, okay, this is fantastic. This is great. That was the feedback that we were getting.
When your market research tells you that, no, this is a miss, you haven't quite gotten this.
Yeah.
Go back to the drawing table and redo this. This is what the market needs. And there's no negotiations on this area.
Yeah.
How does that affect your ego as a creator?
I mean, you do take it personally, I mean, it is, when people critique your products, you do have this it is, and these are good products. I mean, like these products for what it's worth, they are niche products, but they're great products. People, when they taste them, love them, I think the main issue that we have with them is that the price point has just never been to the point where it could be like a mass market product.
Yes.
And then also we need to explain the products. And so we're a small company with no money, basically trying to do what Indomie did with, Indomie. It took them 17 years, right, to do what they did, and a lot of money, So, I think that's the issue that we have with these products. But yeah, I mean, definitely you do feel like, yeah, that does hurt,
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you're kind of like, what's your raison d'etre? Why are you here? Is it for you and to make yourself feel good, or is it to actually create a product that somebody wants to use?
Well, that's a muscle that you've had to develop over time, and I think maybe your experience in finance and kind of knowing how to structure processes and doing the needful in terms of like not many businesses, for instance, will enter and be like, okay, let's get market research, let's get the experts in to do what we cannot do.
Yeah.
And that obviously that self-awareness would have come from your experience, I'm going to assume. Would you agree that it's really from your background that that, okay, let's cut all the back and forth, let's cut the ego stroke in here and really go to the source and really find out if our product is in fact ready, and take the ego out of it, as much as it might be painful. Can we go ahead and take the ego out of it? I can imagine that would have saved you a lot of time.
Well, I mean, look, it did take us years to get to that point. One of our shareholders asked, what took you so long? You know what I mean? Because this thing is so obvious. What took you so long? And I think, the finance part, the banking part probably worked against us for a while, because we were like, we don't want to get into this crowded space. The market is too, there are too many big companies in this. We can't compete. But not really looking at it in the sense that, look, yes, it is there are a lot of big companies in it, but it is, first of all, a growing segment. And then also, if you can provide a product that is differentiated enough but still meets people's requirements, then you can, you don't need to like be the market leader, right? And this kind of market.
The market is big enough.
The market
for
is big enough for you to take, have a couple of percentage market share, and you be good. And then that gives you sufficient financial muscle to actually do other things, you know what I mean, and develop other products. But you've got to have this baseline product that covers you,
or keeps the lights on.
Keeps the lights on, yeah. And so I think that there is a bit of that. There was a bit of that of like, we want to be the first to do things. We want to do things differently. We want to, and I think that that can work against you. But at a certain point, because it had taken so long.
I want to kind of ask a little bit about on the journey that Amayi Food has taken so far, and you personally, what has been some of the biggest challenges that you felt you've had throughout the last 10 years, from 2004, from when the idea was conceived to when you now went to market and you hit the ground running with the product? What's been your biggest mistake, would you say?
Gosh, I mean, there've been lots of mistakes.
Well,
along
maybe not
the
even
way.
mistakes. We all have them, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, some of the challenges that you experienced and how you've sort of dealt with them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the first challenge was probably the fear of kind of taking the leap. And
Oh God, I love you.
leaving and, you know.
Honestly, it's huge, isn't it?
No, it's a huge, I think it is a big, big deal. And I think you have to go through this process, you know, as an entrepreneur and kind of be like, well, what's the worst that could happen, right? You can fail, but even if you fail, what are your options? You know, you are a professional, you have really good contacts, you can probably, you can end up, you know, back in exactly where you were before. And you know what I mean? So
Yes.
I had to work through that first of all. And then once I got through that to now actually say, okay, let me do this, right? And then it's just kind of, it's visualizing, it's putting it together, it's, you know, breaking it down into tasks because it seems like such a huge
Yes.
thing. I remember before we had set up properly, I went on a tour of the Nestle Flower Gates plant in Ogun State. It's Shagamu Interchange. And that's where they make the Maggi cubes.
Okay.
And I mean, first of all, let me just say, and I never used to be interested in factories. I never wanted to go into factories, but you know, now I've got this unhealthy obsession with factories, right? And so when I saw it, I was like, oh, it's a thing of beauty, you know?
Wow.
I was like, so, I mean, you could eat off the ground, right? You
yes.
could eat off the ground. It was so sparkling clean and, you know, I was so awestruck by the thing. And, you know, you're kind of like, how do I go from where I am
to that?
And I still have those thoughts. Every day I have those thoughts.
Yes.
You know, like, how do I do
transition,
that?
yes.
And so I think that when you do think about it that way, it can really be very,
overwhelming.
very, overwhelming and intimidating. And, you know, it's scary. And you're kind of like, I don't even know how to do the first, you know, sort of crack the first part of it. So I think that's been an ongoing challenge. So, you know, now we're at a place we're supposed to be scaling, right? We've got a product, we've kind of done a product market test, and it's been a successful test. And so now we need to up our capacity because we can't actually meet the existing demand that we have.
That's a good space to be in there, isn't it?
It is good, but it can get bad very quickly. But, you know, because of that, we can't even grow demand aggressive, which is what we're supposed to be doing. So we have to scale. And like, you know, I think I said this earlier in our earlier conversations, it's one of those sectors, you know, industries where you go big or you go home. There's no point it's not a cottage industry because you'll never cover your costs as a cottage industry. The margins are just way too small for you to do that. So we have to scale. And so, you know, just now looking at that, you know, how do we do that? You know, yes, you have to get equipment in and new equipment. And what is that equipment like? Are you going too big if you get this size? Are you going to, you know, just sort of trying to think through that process is also, you know, very difficult, especially if you're not doing some sort of turnkey solution. You know, we're not at the point where we've got some big company coming in and designing our plant for us and saying this is, so we're still fitting bits together. And that's, you know, the chances of like messing up are actually quite high.
You're
you know,
always
when you
worried
do that.
about that as a manufacturer, aren't you? Should we be buying for operations now, or should we be buying for operations that we perceive will have X amount of years from now? It's always an ongoing battle. You're trying to weigh it up constantly. But I think you mentioned quite rightly about that fear. And I think a lot of the time as entrepreneurs, we don't talk enough about the fear that we deal with. And it's not as if the fear somehow comes at the beginning and then vanishes at some point, and then it's just grow. It's for me personally anyway, I find that the fear's always been there. So I've been doing this now, I've been manufacturing for about 10 years now also. And you know, you're constantly trying to find ways to grow your skills and to grow your operations, but you're having to do that with this constant weight of the fear. And I think we don't really talk about this fear. And even when we do talk about it, we don't really delve into what the fear looks like. We sort of say, oh yeah, well, I'm scared, but what does your fear look like? I think for me personally as an entrepreneur, my fear is there, but it's juxtapositioned with this intense need to want to progress at the same time. And I find that that's what really drives my motivation. Regardless of my fear, it keeps me dragging myself along to ensure that I don't give up and I keep going regardless of whatever situation arises. What is that thing for you that just silence your fear to the point where it doesn't immobilize you and just keeps you going? Trials and tribulation, irrelevant, whatever dilemma, NEPA, diesel, whatever it may be, machinery, people power. What is that thing that keeps you pushing and waking up every morning and trying it over and over again?
God, I think it might be a little bit of insanity. I don't know.
What is your insanity?
Do you know what I'm saying? Because you ask yourself, how do I keep doing this to myself every day? Look, I don't know. I mean, I think, there's definitely the need to succeed. There is a need to not necessarily prove myself to anyone, but that thing I talked about before, like building something that outlasts you.
Yes.
Like I was telling somebody, the idea that I would still be 10 years from now being the main originator of like solutions to the company's problems, like makes my skin just crawl, because by that time I want to be a company where I can attract the best people, you know what I mean? And have smarter people than me in the room. And because to me, that's how the company grows. It's not, if I'm still kind of being,
you're the one running,
right? It's not going to go beyond kind of what my capabilities are. And as great as I think I am, there's a limit. And, you have to have fresh ideas. And so I want to be, I want to have something or build something where, even if I'm not working at this company in 10 years, because I have a dream life. My dream life is to go to tennis tournaments and go bird watching.
That is nice.
That is my dream life. And that's what I would like to be doing. But, to at least look and be like, wow, I actually built that. I was part of that. And it's a company that people want to work for. And it's a company that people, want to contribute. And it means something to them. It's not just, okay, I just have this job and I kind of go there. And well, first of all, I'd like to say that, entrepreneurship is also very isolating. They're not that many people, right, that you can actually talk to, going through the same experience. And even with my co-founders, because I am the one who does the day-to-day, there's a limit to, how much, they can relate to the madness that persists.
That happens every day.
So, but, you keep going. But once in a while, like the other day, we've been having some issues with packaging, and I actually contemplated the possibility of failure, which I don't do that often. But, when you're kind of like, wow, okay, I'm
this
tired.
is a lot.
This is a lot. And I'm used to banging against the brick wall, but, there's
some
really
days you don't
too
necessarily
much,
feel as strong as you
so,
always feel.
Yeah.
I have those days, and that constant reminder just to let yourself know that it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
To have those days.
Yeah.
To feel like you can't find a solution today.
Yeah.
And you can just go to sleep.
Exactly.
And be satisfied that it's okay. I've done my best.
Yeah.
And it's okay for me to try again.
Yeah.
And to take those breaks.
So I don't think that I get that enough. I'm not sure about other entrepreneurs, but I definitely don't feel like I get that enough,
Is it we don't get it or we don't take it?
Both, probably. I don't think I've ever felt as alive as I have now, over the past few years in terms of occupation. I'm using like high school chemistry, which I never thought I would use, right?
Oh, really?
Ever again. I'm using it, in this, and, just at least it's like every fiber of your being is involved in the whole thing, in the whole enterprise. And I never felt that way about a job, I never felt like that fulfilled. I never thought that it was I was learning new things, but I didn't feel like I was growing really
Like
by the end.
It doesn't. There's a difference between when you are learning something new,
Yeah.
and something just igniting a fire inside you to really just keep going. You don't know why, you don't know how, but it just makes you feel like, okay, I'm actually not. It goes beyond just enjoying this. This is satisfying for me.
Yeah.
And I think for me personally, I derive satisfaction, not because I make furniture, of course, we're manufacturers. The satisfaction for me doesn't necessarily come from, I get an order, I deliver, I get paid.
Yeah.
That's not where I derive my satisfaction from. I think for me personally, it's that moment, and sometimes it's quite rare. It's not every transaction that I feel it in, but the moment where I get a job, and somehow we encounter a problem, and then we're now like, okay, how do we solve this problem? We now solve that problem.
Yeah.
My satisfaction is in that tiny moment, not even to the point where I deliver the chair and it's like the customer's happy. I don't necessarily, as an entrepreneur, I don't really get satisfaction from that per se.
Yeah.
It's just that ability to feel I'm alive because I've stumbled across this issue.
Yeah.
I found a solution to this issue.
Yeah.
The grit.
Yeah.
The coarseness of that tiny little moment made me feel so alive that I'm actually addicted to that feeling. Because you did mention earlier that you've got to have a certain degree of madness, or is it insanity, to want to keep knocking your head against the brick wall that is entrepreneurship, day to day, in and out, constantly going back, regardless of the problems. What is it in that thing that just keeps you going back? Try to just put it in a few words for us. If you can try and describe that thing for me.
Well, I guess, when I have those days when stuff, things are really rough and I'm kind of like, what am I doing? And, why am I here? Am I crazy, etc. I kind of just sort of go back. I kind of have to remember where I come from, I think about my grandmothers, these strong women who overcame all these huge barriers to do what they had to do. And so I have to be like, just remember where you're from. You didn't come all the way here, from Zimbabwe to be done in by this thing, like think about the strong line of women that you came from.
Strong warriors and women.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of, what I do regularly to, my grandmothers had to overcome barriers that were a lot worse than what I had to overcome. So, and they did. So
that's a lot of self-talk, would you say? What does that look like when you're trying to reconnect back to those roots where you derive that strength from? What does that look like? Is that self-talk? Is it prayer? Is it meditation? What does it look like?
I don't think it's anything that fancy. I think it's just kind of a deep breath. It's like, remember where you're from. And yes, and it is probably self-talk. I'm probably muttering to myself around, my house, just be like, remember who you are. Remember where you're from.
But you can't be done in.
I can't be done
You
in.
can't be done in.
I can't be done in.
We didn't get here.
Yeah. To be done in. Yeah.
Absolutely. So on an average day, talk us through what your average day is like from the moment you wake to the end of the day. What are the things that you're doing?
Mainly problem solving, crisis resolution, problem solving. I hope that we're going to actually get better at as a company, because there's some things that I think we need to be more proactive about, which will assist us in, not having to be doing so much triaging and problem solving. But, on a typical day, I'll get to the office. And
what time do you get to the office?
Well, it depends. If I do the school run and I go straight from the school run, it's like an hour now because we're in Ikeja.
See, that means problem solving for you starts before you get to the office.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the phone from, exactly.
Yes.
So typically I'll drop my kids off at school. Then I start my commute, which is about an hour because we moved to Ikeja recently. During the commute, then I'm answering calls, making calls. We have a WhatsApp group with the core team. So, that will be my chance to follow up on issues that I may have brought out the previous day. We talk about our production schedule, which we normally plan at the beginning of the week, and how it's going versus what we planned. and then there'll be payments that will need to be made, which at this point I'm the one who's doing them. And then other than that, we are sort of dealing with supply chain issues. So companies, our suppliers, we're trying to find multiple suppliers for like particular inputs to manage our risk. And so, that's a process that we're going through. We're trying to also work with some farmers in Oyo State. To plant some
pretty big.
peppers for us. We hope that, we're piloting a scheme now, so we hope that actually comes through. And we're fundraising. So
how's that going? Fundraising in Nigeria, what does that look like? What's been your experience?
It probably looks like fundraising in most places. It's really tough. It takes a long time. I think that with Nigeria, with Africa in general, though, the challenges really come regarding the financial instruments. People aren't familiar with the different kinds of financial instruments that startups normally use. So you have to kind of explain to people. So I think that can be challenging. But, we've had success. So, I can't knock, I'm very happy that we've had success. We're now doing a second round because we need, as I mentioned earlier, we need to scale. So, that is very challenging. It's always challenging.
So for an entrepreneur who's out there and who's perhaps listening to this podcast and, has a great business idea, they've kind of kickstarted it or they're in the middle of developing it and they're seeking funding, what would be the advice that you would give to them? Just bearing in mind that, this conversation or fundraising is quite a difficult experience for many in Nigeria. And I think maybe even from my little experience, it's because we don't have this connectivity of information. The source you go to, this is where you go to go and get your funding. This is who you need to speak to. This is the process. It's already been, sort of mapped out for you. With the gaps that are in this environment in terms of funding, what would be your advice to somebody who is seeking funding in this current climate?
Yeah, look, it is tough. And I know that also Africans in general, we don't like to sell equity in our company. We are very suspicious of shareholders. So we tend to want to, keep the whole company to ourselves. But I think for us as founders, we realize that we're not going to grow this thing very far if we're just dependent on our own resources. And there's a certain point where you can take loans from banks, but you have to get to that point. And if you sort of take the loan before that point, you end up risking your company. You can lose the whole thing. So I think it's important for people to understand that there is, there's that trade-off. But other than that, there are grants organizations available. I know places like Tony Elumelu Foundation give, sort of small investments, and they do that every year. They are, I think the Lagos State had an initiative also. I know like CBN, has some intervention funds that they also have where there's a moratorium. So if you are a company that the cash flows are sufficient to support a loan, you can do that. But there is also an angel investor community, an ecosystem. Now, admittedly, it's more advanced for tech,
we've gotten that sense, haven't we, in the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's definitely more advanced for tech. But you've got Lagos Angel Network, and they regularly have deal days. I think it's quarterly deal days. So if you've got a pitch and etc., you can send it to them, and they, if they like your idea enough, they'll invite you to pitch. Rising Tide Africa, who are investors of ours. They also have deal days, and so you can always send to them too. And Rising Tide, of course, want to deal with they're female focused. It's a female angel investor group, and they like female focused or female led, female managed businesses. So that's also a plus.
So there are quite a lot of options out there.
Yeah, there are options.
Agreed. You probably have to dig a little bit deep and really ask people the questions, where can I go?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the solutions for funding can be had in just having conversations. But the ones you've mentioned, I'm very familiar with quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
but I always find, and you know, the rhetoric you normally hear is that, okay, we know their names, we've seen their websites, but how do you get through to the right people? Because there's always this disconnect sometimes with people who say we give funding, but how do you access the funding? How do you get through to the right person? You hear that the entry point is so high, and as someone who's just starting out, it's almost like, well, I don't have 3 years accounts. How am I supposed to get? Do you know what I mean? So it's
I get it, and it is very frustrating. I mean, there's some development finance institution grant proposals where there'll be like, a requirement will be that you have to be profitable for the last 3 years, and you're kind of like, well, if I was profitable, I wouldn't be looking for grant funding, right? I would have lots of other options. But and it's also goes to the point of people who aren't actually practitioners, people who aren't entrepreneurs, who design some of these things, because you're kind of like, you're not thinking this through. But I think the benefit of organizations like Lagos Angel Network and Rising Tide Africa is that they are a lot of entrepreneurs in those organizations. So they kind of understand it, yes. They understand the idea of a pitch. They understand the fact that, you could be somebody who's coming in, you've got the concept, but you've got the proof of concept, for example, but you now need the money to roll it out. So there is an understanding of that. I think a challenge for a lot of people is the packaging of it. How do you do a pitch? How do you present the pitch? How do you
say that?
I think, I think that is it's a challenge for me.
For many of us.
And I come from that space. So,
But I think as well, the great thing about some of the organizations that you've mentioned that I'm also familiar with is that they also offer you the prep time to do those pitches. Now I know that Rising Tides, for instance, if you want to go and do a pitch, if you want to go to a deal day, there's several days they'll sit with you to prepare your pitch, to run through it, to practice it, before you now step in front of that crowd to basically pitch. So and they're also offering mentoring. They offer quite a lot of mentoring, and I think for somebody who's starting out, it's actually very important. I will probably say the mentoring is actually the biggest take home for you if you are starting out, to go for that, to get that network of people around who are entrepreneurs themselves in some respect, and understand the process, can take you through it, leading you up to the point where you can now perhaps present and really pitch.
I agree. I think, and through the mentoring, as you say, is where you can get the connections too. That you do, because
we can't forget the fact that a lot of it is about who you know as well.
So it's a very good point.
So Kudzayi, I wanted to just, as a fellow woman in business, there's this awakening that I'm sensing in this environment for a lot of young women. Well, not necessarily just the young women. There's a lot of sort of more seasoned women as well who are now coming into this new awakening. That's why you hear a lot of stories of, women who've been in banking and who've been in finance and oil and gas. All of a sudden, they want to do something more creative. There's definitely a shift going on right now that I've recognized, especially my own little group and network of women. And younger generations coming through the woodworks of women who are growing more and more ambitious every single day. The woman who says, I'm not satisfied with just doing my 9 to 5. I want to go into the creative field. My parents might not necessarily understand, but I'm willing to go against the grain and really fight for this new ambition I think is stirring inside of me. However, in this environment, the culture still wants to pull me back, and I want to resist and go further forward. And this kind of tug and pull between, what the cultural expectations are and what my newfound passion is. There's a huge movement that I'm noticing a lot more young people, not just women per se, but young people in general. How would you say that fight has been, from your experience in business, trying to balance the mum life, the wife, and that entrepreneurial spirit that you basically have to fight for it. It's not something that you just get up and go. Some days it's a struggle. How would you say that you're managing to somehow coexist in both spaces and still give both 100%? And how might you advise somebody who is considering going into that space of the tug and pull, and still ensure that they have success in doing so?
Yeah. Look, I think you have to be comfortable with the fact that you're not going to be able to give 100% to all areas all the time. That's just a reality. And I think that is for anyone, woman or not. I think that is just life in general. But I think as women, we have more expectations, we're held up to higher expectations about what we're supposed to be able to do. You're supposed to look like a supermodel and be a supermom and be like an amazing doting wife, and then still have yourself together, be an entrepreneur. And so I think that you have to be comfortable with some level of like imperfection, because it's tough. It's really difficult, but all the parts kind of fit together. So I don't think I would be able to be the mother that I am, and I'm not saying I'm the perfect mother, or the wife that I am, and I'm not saying I'm the perfect wife, if I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, if I wasn't an entrepreneur. Because, like the minute I'm not, if I'm sitting in some job that I hate, that kind of affects all other aspects of my life. So, it is a trade-off. It's definitely a trade-off. This way, yes, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm more fulfilled than I probably have been professionally, even though I'm a lot poorer. But, because I'm more fulfilled, my outlook is different. My outlook towards my family, towards my marriage, whereas if I wasn't, I think I would be very frustrated, and a lot of my mind space would be taken out, would be taken up by that frustration, and it would affect my ability to relate, and to function in other parts of my life. So life is imperfection. I mean, that is just how it is. And it's a trade-off, and it's constant flux. You're not going to always be 100% in all areas. I think the key is to have the support network that you need around you, a partner that is understanding, because I think if you don't have that can also be really, really difficult. But then you also, you do need to take those moments, take some time out to spend with my husband, because it's been a week or something, or and put the phone down because your kid is talking to you. And so there is that level of discipline. And I'm not saying that I have it, but I'm saying that it's a muscle that you have to grow. You have to build it, and you have to grow it. So yeah.
So is there any opportunities at Amayi Foods for any sort of young people or young person trying to sort of break into the industry?
Yeah, we have, we actually do take industrial training students. They're normally food tech or food science students from tertiary institutions. So, if you are a food tech student or food science student, we'd be happy to take you. And yeah, I mean, there are always opportunities in sales and promotion. So
okay, so there's anybody out there who's listening to this podcast right now and wants to reach out, how may they reach you?
They can email us at info@amayifoods.com.
Fantastic. Kudzayi, it's been an absolutely amazing afternoon with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I've gotten a few nuggets from it myself. I'll be taking on some of your advice myself in my day-to-day. I just want to appreciate you. We'll be talking a lot more. We'll be talking a lot more, and I would love to delve in a little bit deeper. I've got a few other questions, to be honest. There's quite a few other questions I can probably ask you off camera. But thank you so much again for your time, Kudzayi.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely
great.
Welcome.